Maqasid al-Sharia. Number one, Sheikh,
Deen.
your protection of your deen, your faith. Why? Your faith is what makes the society. So you have to protect it, right? Number two, your honor.
No, nafs, your soul.
Your soul, right? Your soul. Basically, you have to protect your soul from corruption. Okay. Number three, your honor, your izzah. Okay. Then your aql,
Intellectual, yeah.
in your intellect as well. Okay. Okay. So is it five already?
Mal. No, the fourth.
Mal.
The fifth is mal. Wealth.
Wealth. So this is we have what? Repeat again. Deen, nafs, aql, and
nasl, which is your honor, your lineage, and your wealth.
Yeah.
Or property.
Property. Absolutely.
Or wealth.
All of these things are directly relevant to society.
Yes.
Every single one of these five things has a direct impact on how societies function.
I believe Engels wrote a book on the origin of family, private property, and the state.
Yes.
So one leads to another.
Absolutely.
If you have a good family, you
Yes.
have a good society.
That's right.
Respect for property, respect for the state.
Absolutely. And this is what Western philosophers have been talking about for centuries. Without God, what they have done, they have divorced God from their life. God is not, and I don't blame them because of Christianity. Because Christianity was not providing solutions. Christianity was causing more and more problems because of lack of solutions. Because they had a lack of solutions, they had a lack of instructions from Christianity, they freed themselves from religion. Islam was a very unpleasant reality for them, because the Islam they had learnt about. Why were Enlightenment philosophers not inclined to Islam, even though they praised Islam in their writings? They praised Islam over Christianity in their writings.
So why didn't they accept Islam?
Because the view of Islam they had was completely distorted. The books that were given to them on Islam in their languages were completely misrepresenting Islam. I'll give you examples, practical examples that we can understand. What was available in Britain in the 18th century in Islam? What writings?
I think the Quran had been translated already.
Yeah, George Sale. Let's say the most famous translation of the Quran in the English language was George Sale's translation in the 18th.
Pictors.
No, Pictol is very
later,
old.
right?
No, Pictol is a Muslim.
Yeah.
George Sale was
An Englishman.
a missionary.
Yeah.
Okay. His translation was very hostile. Very hostile. Okay. In fact, before the translation, he wrote a preliminary discourse. If you pick up Sale's translation today, you will see a preliminary discourse. In this discourse, he sets the stage for the reader. Okay, he tells the reader, this is all rubbish, it's imposture, Muhammad was just an imposter. He was a very extremely biased translation of the Quran. That's what people were reading. So before they get into the translation, they read Sale's
Preface.
hostile treatment of Islam. So they are already conditioned. Okay, that's one. Then histories. What histories are they reading? Simon Oakley. In 1708, Simon Oakley was an Orientalist. He wrote a book on Islam, or the history of the Saracens. It was called History of the, and it has, can you believe it? As late as the 18th century, the Muslims are being called Saracens, which is a medieval term. It's a medieval term, right? So he wrote a history of the Saracens. By the way, I have this book in my library. So I'm not talking without even handling these books. Simon Oakley, amazingly, paints a very hostile, a very Christian kind of treatment of Islam, or the history of Islam in his book. It's not necessarily in favor of Islam, right?
Yes.
Then there are other writings. I mean, there was another book published in late 17th century, 1697. There was a book titled The Nature of Imposture, The Life of Mehmet. The Life of Mehmet. Okay, so every single biography written in the 17th and the 18th century on the Prophet was either hostile or very biased.
Any good ones? Any positive
No,
ones?
none.
Okay. I know Voltaire, was it a lot of Enlightenment thinkers did write positively about the Prophet, peace be upon him.
Yes, later. In the latter half of the 18th century, people like Gibbon, Edward Gibbon, who had no respect for Christianity, who apostatized from Christianity. He said, it doesn't make sense. What is this, right? Because he was a historian. So in his section on Islam, he does praise the Muslim civilization. Okay, not necessarily the Prophet and his history, because he, again, who is he reading from? Oakley.
Yeah.
Gibbon is reading Oakley to write on Islam, right? So there were very limited sources available, and Gibbon was mainly reading in Latin, in French, and in English. Okay, so Gibbon was not reading in Arabic. Gibbon was simply using secondary sources on Islam, not primary sources. Okay, it wasn't his own. I'm sure if Gibbon had read the Arabic works, if he knew the Arabic language, it would have been very different, his treatment, right?
Come to an even better...
because he was already free of Christian bias.
Yes.
Okay. Then we, yarhamukallah. Then we have people like Adam Smith.
Right.
Adam Smith, the man who wrote Wealth of Nations. Okay.
What was his view about Islam?
Very positive. He actually pays a tribute to the Muslim civilization.
Not charging riba, maybe something like that.
No. He didn't talk about riba. He talked about the Muslim civilization and what it did to the world. Not in his main works. He doesn't do that in his main works. Not in the Wealth of Nations and all that. But he talks about it in his essays. So he wrote an essay on the history of astronomy, and he paints a lavish tribute to the Muslim civilization. He actually says that after the Roman Empire, Islamic civilization was the greatest empire which provided that peace which is necessary for scholars to study the connecting principles of nature. In other words, the scientific revolution that took place under Islam was basically facilitated by Muslim tolerance and the nature of the Muslim law. That's what he actually states clearly, right? And I'm paraphrasing, by the way. It's there. I mean, I've written on it. So then we have other Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire. Earlier, he was hostile against the Prophet. Later on, when he had actually read on the Prophet, he praised him. But then this process of praising the Prophet and treating him objectively, it changed in the 19th century for the better. Okay, in the 19th century there were many scholars who started to defend the Prophet of Islam against all the lies and all the hatred and hostile treatment he had received in previous centuries. Okay, there is, for example, a man called John Davenport. Okay, he wrote a book titled An Apology for Muhammad and the Quran. An apology for Muhammad and the Quran. So in this book he actually argues that what we have been saying for centuries about Muhammad and the Quran is mostly false. Okay, then we have people like Thomas Carlyle, who was a man of literature, George Bernard Shaw. Okay, people like this, they paid lavish tributes to Prophet Muhammad and his legacy, right? Because these people could see beyond their Christian bias. But the reason why Enlightenment thinkers could not appreciate Islam as it should have been, because they had a very hostile view on Islam. And this view was caused by those hostile works they were reading on Islam. Okay, so that's why Enlightenment thinkers could not see Islam as an option, as a way of life. So they broke away from Christianity. There were three reactions to Christianity in the 18th century. I hope I'm not boring you with this detail. Okay, these are very important discussions so people know how our societies and how our laws were formed. How did we get here in the first place? In the West in particular. The Enlightenment thinkers, or in the 18th century, the Enlightenment century, okay, there were three reactions against Christianity. Either these philosophers and thinkers became apostates completely. They left Christianity. It didn't make sense. Wasn't providing solutions, social solutions for them, right? Or they became deists.
Like Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson, John Locke, no. Jefferson was a deist. I don't know if he was a deist. He was a Unitarian.
I think the
Voltaire was deist.
Yeah.
Okay. Most thinkers were deist.
American founding fathers generally were deists, I think.
Okay. I'm not aware of
like Franklin and.
Okay. I don't know about them. I know about the Enlightenment philosophers. A lot of them, they actually became deists, right? Then the third reaction was, the first was atheism, outright atheism. Okay, like David Hume, for example. Okay, and then Kant was a deist. I think Kant was a deist. Immanuel Kant was deist. Voltaire was a deist, and there were other examples as well. So
deism essentially says God created the world, but he doesn't intervene in human affairs.
Exactly, he left it. He left it to run by itself, basically.
Like
yeah, exactly. So he's not. He's an inshallah. He's an absentee landlord.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was the second reaction. The third reaction was Unitarianism. They became Unitarians.
Which is getting closer to Islam.
It's basically rejecting the Trinity. They rejected the Trinity outrightly. They said the Trinity is no good. Okay, so what happened here is these three reactions caused people to write different things and had different, maybe move this way, had different outlooks on life. That's why a lot of the moral values or basis for law or philosophies of law come from the 18th century. Right. Okay, a lot of what
classical liberalism.
Classical liberalism, or you can say proto-liberalism, right, which was still being formulated in the 18th century. Then we had later on people like Thomas Paine, right, John Stuart Mill in the 19th century, and so on and so forth, right? So liberal, he was a liberal philosopher.
Utilitarian.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and then the idea of hedonism was born, right? That the pursuit of human pursuit is all about seeking pleasure.
Okay, Epicureanism.
Exactly.
Stoicism.
Sort of. Not strictly speaking, not exactly Stoicism, right? Yeah. Because Stoics were very on moral issues.
They were quite wise.
100%. But this was something, a different beast altogether. Yes. Hedonism, and it manifested itself in the 19th century. We saw the outcome of hedonism, what happened in the 19th century. It was already there in the 18th century. Yes. But in the 19th century, this beast was on steroids. Yes. Okay, the beast of hedonism and what it caused, what happened. I mean, I believe even the French Revolution was a direct outcome of it. Okay.
I think the great thing about Islam is we don't go too much for Stoicism, too much for Epicureanism, too much for liberalism. We're just right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave us the truth.
Absolutely.
So we're not prone to too much extremism or too much liberalism.
Absolutely.
We're just in the right.
Absolutely. And we don't need human philosophers who are conditioned by their circumstances, their experiences, their short reading of literature. Okay, because all humans are limited by everything.
We're all biased. We're all.
We are conditioned.
Ignorant.
We are conditioned. We are prejudiced in some cases. So if a philosopher is writing in Britain or in France or in Germany, he's writing according to his own circumstances and his challenges. Right. That's all he knows. He's not aware of what's happening in India necessarily. He's not aware of what's happening in Indonesia, in Java, or in let's say in Australia with the Aborigines. He doesn't know what's happening there. So he can't treat their problems. He's looking at his problem. So those solutions, those writings cannot be applied to the whole planet.
Yes.
It would, but God, Allah, who created us, who gave us a system to live by, that system can be applied. And that system, when it's applied, it shows us that it produces a prosperous society, a happy society. Yes. Okay.
I think the sort of Orientalist conception of Islamic countries was that they were sort of static economically. That there was a sort of, I think in Christian civilization it was quite they were sort of trying to explore the world, conquering other countries, and they perceived the East, the Middle East, to be sort of static and sort of
static. Very mysterious,
mystical,
and very lustful. The harem and the black eunuch. That's the classical image of the East, the Orient. What is the Orient? The black eunuch and the harem, and the belly dancing. And the dancing girl. I mean it has a lot to do with the Ottomans. And there's no doubt there is some truth to it. Okay, because the Ottomans were into this kind of stuff, right? But that wasn't the civilization of Islam. That was a product of very limited circumstances, okay, with the Ottomans. How Ottomans came to be Ottomans is another topic altogether.
And also I think when it comes to sex, within Christianity there's this very sort of puritanical strain whereby you had a figure like Paul who says, I wish that all men were as I am, i.e. celibate, and this tendency towards monasticism. In Islam, Allhumdulillah, as far as I know, brother, we don't have any kind of enforced celibacy or any kind of...
No, it is discouraged.
Yes.
Actually, in Islam, we have a rule that if you fear adultery, it is obligatory upon you to get married.
Well, there you go.
This is why we have the phenomenon we have in the church, right? Where thousands of children are being abused. I mean, recently a report came out from France where I don't know how much, it was a huge number.
Thousands.
I mean, it was a huge, shocking number of kids who were abused from the 1970 up to 2020, 50 years, right?
And I say to, sorry, go on.
Please.
And I say to Christians who say to us as Muslims, why in your Jannah do you have wine and fruit and women? And they say these are all earthly delights. And I would say to them, well, look at the Garden of Eden. It was an earthly paradise. And you know, they think that, you know, they're very hypocritical about that, brother, because they look at us and they say, oh, why in Islam can you have 4 wives? Why can you have potentially, you know, concubines in case of war? You know, and yet they're being hypocritical because they want those same things, but they pretend that, you know, it's immoral or that it's disgusting.
They have them the wrong way.
Yes. Okay. Because their minds are sort of hung up on sex, and they can't.
Just look at the history. That. Just look at the history of the church. I mean, the Borgias. I don't know if you know about the Borgias, right? I mean, they were an epitome of corruption on all levels. The Pope, including the Pope. Including the Pope. It was a time of crisis in Europe because of this corruption, which was rampant throughout the society. You know, all people were afflicted by it, and then it only increased. And then there were movements. There were reform movements, and there was reformation because of this corruption, partly caused by papal corruption, right? Reformation. The reason was this moral degradation that was going around in the society. Right?
Because I think people saw that Christianity wasn't providing maybe all the answers.
Exactly. And that's why it was the Methodist movement, right, in the 19th century. Why? Because God was not real in Christian life. I mean, Nietzsche in Germany, very intelligent man, he saw the society, he said, where is God? God is, he said, when he said God is dead,
and we
have killed him, right? And what was he talking about? He said, socially, God is dead. I don't see God in your society. You don't believe in God. In practice, you don't. Maybe it's an abstract idea in your minds, but God doesn't live in your actions. And this is where Islam emphasizes God living through your actions. Okay? God becomes important and relevant in your lives when you act upon his teachings. Otherwise, God, Allah, is an abstract reality. You don't have any connection with him. There is nothing. Where is Allah if you don't act upon his teachings?
Of course.
You know?
As the Christians would say, it's faith and works together.
No, they don't actually. They believe the faith alone, grace. Exactly. Depends which way. But predominantly these evangelicals, they emphasize the importance of grace.
By faith
which is the Pauline. You know, they take it from Paul, and of course it goes against Jesus, teachings of Jesus Christ, and even James, for that matter. Even if you read the epistle, I mean, this was a huge conflict within the Christian church in Christian history. You know,
it's very interesting, brother. So, how would you say that we address the misconceptions about Islam? Because as a recent revert, I can speak to some of the misconceptions I had about Islam. And you know, I think that these are very prevalent. So, I mean, how do we address these sort of
educating? Firstly, educating ourselves. We need to read books. We need to read our history. We need to understand why our history went the way it went. Okay, why Christians were struggling so much. You know, 1,000 years history of Christianity from the year 1000 to 2000, let's say, right? This was a very chaotic period. I mean, a lot happened in Europe.
Wars of religion.
Wars of I mean, mostly religion, but even kings fighting each other for power, for land.
I'm not pointing that. It's a bit bright. Sorry.
It's too bright. It's too bright. So there's a lot, and likewise, study the history of Islam. Why did Muslims become so powerful? Why was Islamic civilization so influential? And what caused the decline? And are we still in decline? Or are we on the rise again? Right?
I believe, brother, inshallah, now we're at a stage in the West where, you know, we've seen the failings of liberalism, we've seen the failings of Christianity.
People are coming.
Inshallah, Islam will fill the gap.
Absolutely. I believe Islam makes a lot of sense to a lot of people who are seeking solutions to. I mean, people who are busy in their lives, they're living a hedonistic life. For them, Islam is not needed. They don't want Islam.
They would reject it probably.
Exactly. I mean,
but having said that, you know, no, sorry, go on.
So people like that, they wouldn't want Islam because they don't need it. They say we don't need God. There are a lot of people who say I'm happy without God, so why do I need God? This is the attitude people have. But what they don't realize is that God is not going away. Okay, whether you need him or not, he is there. He's always there. He will be forever. He will be forever, right? So that's why you have to pay attention to him.
Yes.
You have to pay respects to him, and when you do,
yes,
suddenly you become happier.
yes, yes. I want to ask you a question, brother, because before I took my shahada, I was seeking. I was trying to establish a sort of objective morality whereby I could sort of pick the good out of all religions, reject the bad, and produce some sort of a moral framework. Do you think that was a silly thing for me to try to do? I'm sure a lot of philosophers have tried to do that throughout history. The reason I chose Islam was because I saw it's the only religion that fully explains
if there was no God,
questions.
if there was no God, then that would be a very good thing to do.
Okay.
If there was no God. But if there is a God, and there is a God, right, then you must listen to him. And how do we know how to listen to him? We look at his revelations, or revelations attributed to him, right? First question number one, does God exist? That's the first question we need to address. All philosophers have indulged in this question primarily. Okay, is there a creator? Is there a supreme entity who made us? Right? That's the first question. Once we overcome that question, everything else becomes very easy to follow.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, what I was trying to do was take something like morality and say, well, morality is God, because morality is goodness.
Who defines it?
Well, every society has common moral,
it becomes relative.
Moral codes.
If there is no God, if there is no moral anchor, if you don't.
But I mean, every society recognizes that murder is wrong, adultery is wrong. But
not every
stealing is wrong.
not every society recognizes adultery is wrong. Not every society recognizes that alcohol consumption is wrong. Not every society recognizes that having extramarital affairs or living, for example, or even
they all used to at least 100 years ago. I mean, things have declined.
Those were religious societies.
Yeah, but even this country recognized those things were wrong. You know, we recognized abortion was wrong. We recognized homosexuality was wrong. We recognized
so long as we were religious.
Yeah, but then they were legalized.
Yeah, because of atheism, because of the rise of secular ideologies.
Yes.
And in these ideologies, man makes the rules, not God.
Yes.
So the world became human-centric.
Yes.
It's not God-centric anymore.
Yeah.
If the universe is God-centric, then God is the boss.
Yeah.
Okay. Or if God doesn't exist, then
we become the boss.
Then there is no boss.
Yeah.
No. You don't become the boss. Yeah. Then there is no boss. Yeah. You do what you want. I do what I want. Yeah. Okay. I steal if I can get away with it. Right. Okay. If there's no God, well, why can I not cheat? Why can I not lie? Why can I not? I mean, I'm not saying atheists are immoral people. I'm not saying that. Again, no secular fatwas. Okay. I'm not saying atheists are immoral. I'm saying morality. The question of morality becomes a relative question.
Yes.
You are your boss and I am my boss. Yeah.
Because if you don't believe in a judge who's going to judge you after you die, then you could just live your life
absolutely
whatever you can get away with.
100%. So this is why God is the moral anchor.
Yeah.
He tells us what is wrong, what is right, and we can justify it.
Yeah.
Rationally, intellectually, we can justify God's rulings. Okay, but the first thing is to establish whether these are actually God's rulings or not. Okay, because this is the trap the Christians fell in.
Yeah. Okay.
This is the trap the Jewish people fell in. Right?
What was the trap?
The trap was laws, rules written by men were taken as God's rules. Okay, so the Bible.
What it says in the Bible.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the stuff in the Bible is not from God. Clearly, when you read the Old Testament, you know this is not God speaking. You know this is not God speaking. In the New Testament, you know this is not God speaking. At the same time, there are many, many beautiful moral teachings that may have an origin with God, no doubt. I believe that. In the Old Testament and in the New Testament, there are moral, ethical teachings that may have come from God originally.
That was my point. I was seeking to pick out the good things from the Bible and reject the bad things.
But then you still need a criteria to pick out. Okay, you still need a yardstick, and we use that yardstick. We use the Quran.
Yes.
The Quran is we believe Quran was revealed by God, and we can show that. We can confirm. I mean, if people don't want to listen, that's another matter. But we can show why Quran could not have come from human mind. There are reasons. We can talk about those reasons. It is not a human product. It is from the divine or from outside of this world. The Quran is not a human product. Why? Because there are many. This is a very long discussion. Why the Quran is not a human product. So once we show that God exists and that God has spoken